It's never an easy thing to talk about, but it does need to be addressed. Suffering and how it affects our discernment. So let's talk. My name is Father Etienne, and this is Listen, My Son, a place to help young men and women on their discovery of God's call for them. Everyone has experienced suffering at some point in their lives, anywhere from mild inconvenience to, struggle of daily life, to moments of real tragedy and pain. Each of these moments shape us and linger with us, and each person confronts suffering uniquely, and so it's a topic that must be handled gently and with great care. This video is meant to be a reflection on the reality of suffering and what meaning can be present in what we all experience and how to come to it. A reality and meaning with an eye towards self-discovery on the topic of vocations. So there are 3 common ways in which we suffer that I would like to discuss with you. The 3 ways we commonly suffer are suffering because of ourselves, suffering because of other individuals, and suffering because of situations, things like sickness, society, natural disasters. Each of them have a unique experience and unique ways of approaching meaning. Each different way will be a separate video, so keep an eye out for each of those. This video looks to explore the ways we suffer because of ourselves and our perceptions of ourselves, and what that looks like, and what that means for us, especially with vocation discernment. In our varied experiences of life, we are often confronted by feelings of shame brought about by suffering. Shame as real suffering takes shape in all areas of life: appearance and body image, family, money, work, addictions, aging, health, trauma, everything. We might express it not quite like shame, but we might describe it as anxiety, fear, loneliness, guilt, depression. And all of these have some root in shame. We might express it when we hide that we're in recovery for addiction. We feel it when we're called an idiot in front of class or a boss. Maybe for flunking out of school, being denied entrance to a community, hearing our parents fight and feeling afraid, thinking that I'm not as beautiful as other women, or I'm not as successful as other men. This is shame. Everyone has experienced it, and these feelings bleed over into our experience of God and the vocation He so richly desires for us. In shame, we begin to doubt the possibility of happily living out a vocation because we believe that we're not worth receiving one or living in the one we believe we're destined to. We convince ourselves that we're unchoosable, unacceptable, or unlovable because we find it difficult to accept our own flaws. Yet if we wish to open ourselves up to the genuine call of vocation and the experience of true love, we must learn to own the fact that we are flawed and be open to the situation in which we find ourselves, poor and broken. We waste a great deal of time and effort in discernment because we would rather hide than accept ourselves, as Jesus already accepts us. How many of you, and I include myself here, have ever said that you wish you could be something different than who you are right now? I wish I was less afraid to speak in public. I wish I didn't struggle with this sin. I wish I was younger. I wish I was older. I wish God had made me different. Or have you ever wished that you were like someone else? Then imagine all the good you could have accomplished if you were simply someone different. The key to confronting this suffering and moving forward means accepting reality and accepting God's love for us. We find it difficult because we find it challenging. That God loves reality. He doesn't call imaginations or ideals or dreams to a vocation. He calls real people with real problems. He calls you. Now, look at the apostles. They were some of the worst choices that could have been chosen. They denied him, abandoned him, betrayed him. But Jesus chose them anyway. We don't like the fact that he calls people he wants, not who we think would be worthy. And we might even actually resent that we've been called. But he does call, and calls us from the messy reality of our lives. And it is in this messiness of our failings and sufferings that God's grace works and has power. And we will never respond fully to that call until we begin that journey of receiving and accepting the gift of ourselves in all of its reality. This suffering can be transformed and provide real meaning for us if we accept it. Now, by accepting, we realize to our advantage that we cannot change ourselves by our own efforts, but that vocation discernment, living the Christian call to holiness, is a grace and victory of God's. After all, God doesn't call the perfect, he calls sinners, so that his power is what drives us. We hear, but God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the powerful. The point we must realize and accept is that we are in fact not worthy of this call, but that we have been chosen nonetheless. Now, does this simply mean we give up and not try to change? No. There's a difference of accepting reality as reality we cannot change and striving for holiness. Accepting that is not easy. It takes time and effort and vulnerability. God does indeed call us to holiness and to strive to be perfect as his Father is perfect. But he also sets us free from the fears and false sense of imprisoning shame we place ourselves under. He seeks to restore in us the freedom to receive good things that he wants to give us, our vocation, so that we can feel his love. Now, how do we begin such a journey? The few things I want to suggest as a starting point comes from a book titled Daring Greatly by Brene Brown. It's not spiritual reading. It's a kind of psychology book, but the information and the practical tips are much needed, and I recommend reading this. What I want to do is go through a few of her basic ideas of confronting shame, suffering, and connect it how it might apply to our life of discernment. First, we need to recognize that we do have shame. Name it as such, and recognize what triggers us in being trapped by that shame, where we continue this suffering. So maybe you failed to do a prayer practice that you've committed to. Let's say pray the rosary each day. It's been 3 days and you haven't done it once. How do you respond to that? Do you call yourself stupid, lazy, horrible? Do you believe that these things are what you are, that you can never change, and so you feel like giving up? How could ever I become, let's say, a priest if I can't even say the rosary? You're experiencing shame. This feeling of shame can even be greater if we experience habitual sins we seem unable to overcome or reconcile some past trauma. Here we can actually experience physical triggers, panic attacks, loops of self-doubt, listlessness, removing ourselves from what typically brings us joy, loneliness. We have to name it for what it is, recognize what brought you there, and resolve to understand and accept who you are in the sight of God, a son or a daughter of a loving Father. Yes, accept that you are not perfect, that yes, you sin and fail, but that God still chooses you. Yes, you need to change behavior, but talk to yourselves as you would talk to a friend who you love and who is experiencing the same thing. Brene Brown rightly says that during a shame attack, we don't speak or accept ourselves as we would speak to or accept someone we love. So we have to learn to love yourself as God loves you. Second is what Brene Brown describes as owning the story. She strongly emphasizes that if we bury ourselves in the story, never speaking of it, denying it, not reaching out, we slowly become imprisoned by it. Our shame gets to write the ending to the story. We might say that we don't let God's light or love in, and so we remained trapped by it. This is death, the death that Jesus conquered. If we let Jesus in, he conquers it festering in our life. He conquers the death that brings darkness. And so I want to suggest two things that help us with this. First is what she says, practice courage and speak out. Here we share the depth of our vulnerability with people we love and trust, who has proven capable of handling such a gift. Here, people like spiritual directors, a vocation director, a trusted friend, can help us break free by showing we can be loved because of our wounds. If such a person can love us, how could God not love us? If we feel known, accepted, and worth by another fallen creature, how can our own Creator not love us, whose very reality is love? The next thing I want to suggest has already been kind of alluded to, and it is to speak to yourself as you would a loved one. What we say to ourselves in our mind carries great weight. I'm sure you've expressed great care for others that have suffered, speaking words of support, of understanding, of love. And if you remember, in our scriptures, we are called to love our neighbor as we would love ourselves. So if we spin that a little bit around, we can say this. If we love our neighbors with the words of kindness, of gentleness, and love, should we not also do the same when we speak to ourselves? We are created in the image and likeness of God, lovable, kind, and compassionate. And if we desire to give ourselves fully in a vocation, we must also give to ourselves the gift of love. Everyone has experienced suffering at some point in their lives. Anywhere, as we've said, from mild inconvenience to the struggle of daily life to moments of real tragedy and pain. And each of these moments shape us and linger with us. And each person confronts suffering uniquely. And reflecting on the reality of suffering and our struggle with shame can really bring about a deep meaning in what we all experience. A reality and meaning with an eye toward self-discovery. If we're willing to confront, to name, to share, and to own the story of our suffering, we can realize that God's power is greater than our own shame. That we can receive and accept the love of God that He desires for us. That despite our failings and our feelings, real or imagined, of unworthiness, God still chooses us for something great. Take confidence in that. Trust in that. Then choose with courage. If you like these videos, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe so you can stay updated on our videos. And please share it with others you think could benefit from. As always, comment down below if you would like to see a specific topic covered in one of these videos. As always, God bless.